Bonjour. This is for International Foods. It is February 11th, 2021, and we are focusing today on the foods of France, right? My personal favorite. And we're going to be making crepes. So we're going to do some sweet crepes, but we're going to talk about options for savory crepes as well, which is basically a thin pancake batter, okay? You can make this up ahead of time and then make them as you want. You can make the crepes, cook them, and use them, freeze them, use them for later, right? So it is a super simple recipe. It is attached with your video and also in your Google Classroom. So we're going to start off with a decent size, large mixing bowl and a whisk because we want to get this as smooth as we possibly can. And we're going to start off today with 1 cup of all-purpose flour, which I have right here. Okay. And with the flour, we want to make sure that we don't have too much. So I'm going to use a spoon to fill the cup instead of scooping because we don't want to have it compact, right? We don't want these. We want this batter to be fairly thin. We don't want it to be too thick. So you want to overfill your cup just a little bit, and then using a butter knife or a spatula, scrape off the top of that, right? So you get a nice true 1 cup measure. So we're going to add that into our bowl. And then we're going to add in some liquid. This is going to be, like I said, a really thin batter when it is done. So first we're going to add 2/3 of a cup of cold whole milk. If all you have is 1% or 2%, that's fine. I like to use whole milk whenever it's for recipes because it's got a higher milk fat. It's not exactly low calorie, right? But not too bad. We're also going to add in 2/3 of a cup of cold water. So you want to make sure both of your liquids are cold. And then you can start to mix that together. So we get the 1 cup of flour, 2/3 a cup of milk, 2/3 a cup of water. Right. You want to start getting that flour incorporated so it starts to absorb that liquid. We want to have it so that it doesn't have any big lumps of flour. That is our goal. We're also going to add into this a teaspoon of salt. We're not adding any sugar. Some crepe recipes will call for sugar. I don't use those. This is a Julia Child classic master recipe, right? So that way the crepes can be used for sweet or savory. Okay? So just a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. We're going to add in 3 large eggs. Okay. So we've got those here. And I've got my little egg cracking bowl here. So with your eggs, you always want to make sure that they're fresh. You want to make sure that there's no blood spots in them and that you don't have any shells either. So when you're cracking your eggs, instead of cracking them on the edge of the bowl, that pushes the shell in more, crack it on the counter into a separate little bowl. Yes, you're going to dirty an extra dish, but now I can look at the egg, make sure that there are no shell pieces in there and it looks good before I pour it into my batter. Because if I get a bad egg on the 3rd one, I have to start everything all over again. We don't want to waste ingredients, right? If you do get any shell pieces in there, use your empty shell to scoop them out. It'll stick to it just like a magnet. All right, so there's our egg number 2. And we're going to add number 3. All right, that looks good as well. Okay, so we'll pour that into our big mixing bowl. I'm going to whisk in our eggs. Towel here to wipe up a little mess. Clean as you go. Okay. So we're going to whisk those eggs in really well, right? And this was going to help give us a lot of structure to this crepe batter, right? Because all we had was flour and liquid. Now those eggs are what's going to hold the batter together, right? And it gives us a beautiful golden yellow color as well. The last part of this batter is to add in some melted butter. Okay. So I have some butter I already melted on the stove. You can melt it carefully in the microwave. Just keep a close eye on it so it doesn't pop and make a big mess. So I'm going to set this to the side for a second. We've got our melted butter right here. So I melted this a little while ago, but you want to keep in mind that you want it melted and warm, not boiling hot, right? So melt it, let it cool down slightly before you add it in, right? We don't want to put boiling hot butter into a mixture with a lot of eggs because we'll end up with scrambled egg chunks. So we're going to do 3 tablespoons of melted butter. And I have a lot extra here, right? We're going to need the extra melted butter for greasing our pan. So for this recipe, for doing one batch, I would easily melt 1 stick of butter, which is about 8 tablespoons total, right? So that'll give me the 3 for the recipe and then the extra for buttering my pan. Okay. Now what you can do with this is, now that the batter is mixed, you can let this sit in the fridge for about a half hour to rest. We're just going to use it today. But if you have leftover batter as well, you can put it in the fridge overnight. It'll sit in there for a couple of days. I usually pull it out a little bit before I'm going to make some crepes, just to let that butter inside warm up a little bit. Give it a really another good whisk to it, and then you'll be fine to make some more. Okay. So we're going to mix that up. We're going to let this rest for a few minutes while we talk about pans. This way. With this. Now, with the crepes, you have a couple of options, okay? When you go to Paris, you will see these big, beautiful, flat, cast iron stones that they cook off of, that tend to be run off of electric, and they're super hot. But we don't always have that at home. You don't always have the need to have a crepe pan and things like that. So I'm showing you some options today of things that you would have in, an everyday average kitchen, okay? So the first one is just a little small non-stick saute pan, okay? When you're doing the crepes in here, it's a little bit harder to get underneath the flip, but I'm going to show you how to do that, okay? Another good option is one of these types of flat pans here, something that you would use for grilling things like French toast, right? Your grilled cheese, things. So a pan that's wider, that has plenty of room to shape it, okay, as you go. It's a little harder to get a circle if you don't have a crepe tool that I'm going to show you, but it's still possible. And then we have the cast iron pan as well, okay? So, but I'm going to show you something different with that one in just a few minutes. So we're going to pull over our little burner here, and I've just got a little gas burner, a little cooktop. You can use those little camping stoves and things if you don't have a gas stove. You can do this on electric. It takes a little bit longer for the pan to heat up. Okay, so we're going to set our pan right on our burner, and I've got my melted butter I'm going to have handy here, right, with a pastry brush. Okay, so I want to take some of that melted butter and just brush in the bottom of the pan. And when you're doing a round pan like this, go a little bit up the sides. That'll make it easier to flip it. Okay. So we're going to let that pan heat up. Now, there are a bunch of different crepe tool options. Okay. And I've got a glass of water here, so when you need to, you can rinse these off into a glass of water. But these are little crepe spinning sticks, right? So you take that, you spread it around. You can use spatulas as well, like a little angled spatula, something like this, or you can use your rubber spatula, or you can just turn the pan. So I'm going to show you a couple of different options. This is if you're doing really large crepes, if you have a big, flat, cast iron type pan, right? And there's all kinds of different sizes. You can easily find these online. So if you start really getting into those, you're going to want to have something to turn your crepes with. So a spatula, this is a wooden crepe spatula. You could also use a large metal spatula or a rubber spatula. Okay. So have some tools handy to be able to flip. Things like little spatulas like this are great for going in around the outside edges of the pan. Okay. So now with our crepe batter, we're going to do about 2 to 3 tablespoons of batter in every crepe. So I'm going to use a 1/4 cup measure, and I'm not going to fill it up all the way, right? This would be 4 tablespoons for a 1/4 cup. So I'm going to go up about 2/3 of the way or so. Especially for a pan that's this size, that's smaller, right? What I'm looking for is to get some intense heat. Now, here's the thing, and this is what frustrates people when they try to make crepes, is usually the first crepe that goes in the pan is the worst one, okay? It doesn't stick right, it doesn't flip right, it doesn't have the right color and things. That's okay, right? Just kind of take it as, like the first one is always going to be the bad one. That's all right, okay? Just go with it. So I got my pan nice and hot. See, I let this heat up. But the reason that first one doesn't always come out right is because usually the pan needs to get a little bit more intense heat. And that's going to come every time you make another crepe. That pan's going to still be smoking hot at that point, and the heat regulates itself. Okay. So we're going to pour our batter into the pan. And so we're going to do just shy of a 1/4 cup. Okay. And now you want to be quick about this point. So you want to take and turn your pan all in the rest. So what I'm doing is anything that's still liquid is I'm spreading that around to make sure that it's well evenly dispersed, right? We don't want a big thick center to this because then it'll be really doughy and gooey in the middle, okay? So this is gonna take a few minutes. When you're working in a small saute pan like this, it does help to have a little rubber spatula to come in and make sure your edges are loosened before you try to flip. But make sure your spatula is also heat resistant, silicone. This one can go up to 500 degrees. You don't want to use something that's going to melt. Right. So what we're looking for is to get a little bit of color on the crepe itself. Just a little bit of golden brown. And you're always going to get more color on the first side than the second side. So we're not quite there yet. I'm just lifting this to see how we're looking. Right. Give it a minute, right? A good solid minute or so on that first side. Especially, like I said, this first crepe tends to be the one that doesn't always look the prettiest, but it's going to get better as you go. That's when these little tiny spatulas also come in handy to scoop underneath the crepe to flip it. Okay, so you can use this to lift it up, take a little peek, getting a little bit of color, not a lot, that's okay. Right, like I said, the next one will be even better. So you're looking at it, it doesn't look like it does much. And I've seen people make crepes and not flip them. They always get flipped, okay? Otherwise, this stays a really weird rubbery texture, like it's not cooked. Yep, we're gonna be able to flip this one now. So a lot of times I will take and just sneak something underneath and give it a little flip. So that's when you can use that little rubber spatula. Like I said, this first one doesn't have a whole lot of color, right? That's okay. It's going to get more as these cook, right? But I'm going to show you a different trick for the next one, right? So we're just going to set this to the side for right now. That one finish on its own. All right. So because this runs on a butane, we're just going to change cans. That's what that little whistling sound was that it was getting low. So we got a new one in. So we're going to use the cast iron pan next, right? Now you could do this on the inside just like I did the last one, but this time, heat going, we're going to do it upside down. You want to make sure that you set it where it's secure, that it's not going to move, because now I have a flat surface similar to a professional crepe pan, right? This is going to get really good and hot. Cast iron holds the heat well, better than the nonstick pan does. Okay, so I can already feel the heat getting up there on the top. Same thing, I want to butter this. So you want to make sure your cast iron, your bottom of your pan is clean. You can do this with a saute pan as well. All right, I'm just going to butter the top. This is the way that I like to do mine because I have a little bit more control sliding underneath and flipping it. Okay, that's the big one. And I get to use my fancy tool. All right, so we're just letting this get good and hot for a sec. I can feel that heat starting to radiate through the center, right? Like I said, every crepe is going to get a little bit better as we go, and you're going to start to be able to put fillings and things into them. So sweet crepes tend to use things like Nutella, strawberries, bananas, cream fillings and things, but also savory crepes as well, right? In France and Paris throughout, you will find lots of crepe stands that sell ones with things like ham and cheese or savory cheese spreads and things that are delicious. So it's not just for dessert. Okay? Now, when you're doing this on the top, you want to be careful because it will pour down if you pour too much. So you want to pour slowly in the center of your pan. Let that spread out. There we go. This is where you want to start to spread it, right? So this is where a spatula or a crepe tool you use. So you slowly shape it, pulling that extra around. You want to make sure that you're not getting too much buildup in the center. This is my favorite way because you can see instantly how that's starting to already set up, okay? Now, what you're looking for, this tool is going to go into a thing of water to rinse it off. The next one is you're going to start to see some settling, you know, a little bit of bubbling and things. It's going to set on the outside first, but I'm looking to see a little bit more action on the inside. Like I said, crepes will get darker on that first side for sure. This one's already getting a little hint of color, but that second and third one's going to get even better. Okay, so there's a lot of options. The key to this is to practice, right? Don't be afraid to make multiple crepes, right? Make up a batter. You're going to get a good dozen crepes out of it. You can make a crepe milieu, cake, yeah, which is a cake layers full of jam and things like that in between. Okay, here we go. So I'm just checking underneath to make sure that this is loosened up before you try to flip. So that's when a spatula comes in handy. So you can see I can move this around, right? And these aren't so hot that you can't pick up and touch the edge. So I got my wooden tool under there. Look at that, right? You can see that little bubbling lift action happening. So you use less time on the second side. Now, traditionally when crepes are made, the first side, like I said, gets the best color. So you want that to be the outside of your crepe. Cut down our heat a little bit while we're finishing this one off. So the inside would typically be where your fillings go. Okay. So when you do things like Nutella, right, traditional French style crepe, fold it in half first, right, so you get up on the edge. You can warm the Nutella up slightly in the microwave. I just put the jar in there for about 15, 20 seconds, just to make it a nice spreadable consistency. Some more on there. That's that hazelnut spread. Definitely a French favorite. Right. Make this a little fancier. I've got some sliced strawberries as well. In on 1/4 of this, because crepes are always folded over. Right, so we've got our fancy little spread, right? We've got our Nutella, we've got our strawberries, and now we're going to fold this over in half, and there's our finished crepe. Okay. Now we're going to transfer that to a plate. You see, as it's sitting here on low, it's getting nice and ooey gooey. Right? There's my pan here. Okay, so there's our finished crepe for the first one. So I'm going to show you another one so you can see the process again. Okay. So we're going to butter in between. Now our pan's really nice and hot this time, so this is going to cook even faster. Hear that sizzle? And even though this pan has a logo in the center, it doesn't show up on the crepe, so it's okay. All right. Got our tool. Batter. Like I said, just pour that real slow in the center. You want to give it time to slowly spread. And then now we're going to shape it. All right, and this is just very light-handed. Spread it out. Like I said, it's always better after you do the first one. Now that pan is really good and hot. Right? And then soak this in the water in between. And you can already see this one's got a lot more steam action happening, right, as we go through. And this one's going to brown a lot faster. It's already getting some color on the backside. Just going to give this a couple more seconds. Now you could also use things like jam. Be a great combination. All right. Slide this underneath, make sure that you're moving. Go. All right. Nice, perfectly set up. You're gonna see a little bit of air bubbles and things like that. That's fine. That's usually just from the batter not resting. If you let it rest that half hour in the fridge, that's just will limit some of the bubbles. But it gives a nice lacing effect, so it's not really a big deal. It's just more visual. Like I said, that traditional crepe, you know, it's easy to do. I'm going to flip this in to make our second one here. Like I said, just a little warm Nutella. Makes it easier to spread. Super yummy. right? And we're only doing it on half because this is a strong flavor, right? So it doesn't need to be on the entire thing. You can if you like, if you really like Nutella that much. Just spread that out. Want the filling to stay inside the crepe as we're eating these, so we don't need to go too far to that outside edge. But then just lay down a few strawberries on the 1/4 of it. Fold that over. And then you have your traditional crepe. Then you could finish these off hitting them with a little powdered sugar or things like that, or just a little garnish on the plate. Heat on this. Show you our finished crepes. Scooch to the side here. We'll bring you guys this way so you can see up close, right? And there you go. So that nice little triangle shaped fold. Lots of options for filling, jams, jellies, and things. Different, you could use bananas instead of strawberries if that's something that you like. But the Nutella has a really beautiful spread when it's warm, especially on the hot crepe. Okay, so that is our French crepes. So hopefully it's something you guys try at home. Just remember, like I said, those first couple, it takes a while to get that pan just the ideal temperature. So don't get frustrated by it. It takes practice. Okay, so practice, practice, practice. But it'll be definitely something good for Valentine's Day this weekend.